Now, the Three Martini Lunch with Greg Corombos and Jim Garrity.
And welcome, everyone, to the Tuesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch, along with Jim Garrity of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. We have good, bad, and crazy martinis for conservatives today. All of it brought to you by Dollar Shave Club. Right now, you can go get your Dollar Shave Club starter set for just $5. DollarShaveClub.com/martini. More on that a little bit later in the podcast. Jim, let's start with our good martini. We go over to Fox News for this, but I want to read a little bit of the CNN one later, too, because it's the same story, but it's not the same article, I assure you. Fox News, the Trump administration's Environmental Protection Agency announced a new plan Tuesday to roll back and replace controversial Obama-era regulations on emissions from coal-fired power plants. While the Obama administration and Democrats saw the Clean Power Plan as a crucial component in international efforts to curb global warming, Republicans have long claimed those regulations went too far and were too costly. From the start of President Trump's administration, his EPA has been working to overhaul the program. The newly unveiled Affordable Clean Energy Rule, as it's called, would give states broad authority to determine how to restrict carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gas emissions that contribute to global warming. He's going to make the announcement formally in West Virginia tonight, which makes a lot of sense. The CNN story says, as his Environmental Protection Agency delivers its latest blow to environmental regulations aimed at reducing carbon emissions, Trump is heading into the heart of coal country to deliver the good news. So, Jim, we talked about this when the Obama EPA put it in unilaterally. So we love the fact that it's being rolled back now, and the administration has the power to do that unilaterally. Basically, it was going to jack up energy prices. It was going to put the coal industry out of business. And we like both of these developments that the Trump administration is helping out with here.
Yeah, and we talked yesterday about a good ad for Kevin Cramer, a key Senate race for Republicans. I think arguably next to North Dakota, one of the top targets for Republicans is right there in West Virginia against incumbent Democrat Joe Manchin. And the Republican challenger, Patrick Morrisey, is the state attorney general who led the charge against the Clean Power Plan, recognizing it as a de facto effort to regulate away the existence of the coal industry, which, oh, by the way, happens to be a pretty key element of the economy in West Virginia. So I suspect the timing of this announcement is not coincidental. It gives Trump some good news to announce at the big rally in West Virginia. My guess is he'll say a kind word or two about Patrick Morrisey because, look, this was a regulation that, had the presidential race turned out differently, was very likely going to go into effect, and we'd be talking about a very different state of the American coal industry right now if that had occurred. That basically, you know, he led all the legal challenges to it, saying that the EPA was exceeding its authority, that nowhere in its legislation creating it did it give it the authority to regulate carbon dioxide. And the Supreme Court agreed enough to say, you know what, you cannot go forward with this plan until we do the full review of this constitutional argument. And they put a stay in effect. And it was only a temporary stay. And the expectation was that at some point the Supreme Court would review this after the 2016 election. And that if they decided that the administration had the power to do this, and there was no real certainty, I should say, about how the Supreme Court was going to come down on this, that a Hillary Clinton administration would enact it where the Obama administration had been frustrated by legal challenges. And then the election turned out differently. And now the Clean Power Plan is pretty much dead and gone and kaput. We see this new replacement legislation. I'm sure you're going to see the environmental groups and green groups complaining loudly about this. I also think it's very likely that anything short of keeping the Clean Power Plan as it is would have led to more or less the same response from these particular groups. So, just good timing on the part of the administration. I think this is good to emphasize their argument that, look, we have more to benefit by being an energy power and developing our ability to harness our resources and become an energy exporter. And, oh, by the way, nullify the power of states like Russia, Iran, Saudi Arabia. This is mostly in the oil markets, but also natural gas, and just generally being a full spectrum energy powerhouse, which will give us more leverage to have better outcomes all around the globe. So from West Virginia to the most distant shores, this is good news.
Absolutely. Absolutely good news. So well done, Trump EPA. I guess a change at the top there didn't change the agenda at all. And we love that. We definitely like the policies that were coming out. We just needed somebody who paid a little bit of attention to the ethical rules. In addition to cleaning up the ethics at the EPA, Jim, it's important to clean up ourselves each day as we get ready. And no matter what you do in the bathroom each morning to get ready, Dollar Shave Club has everything you need to look, feel, and smell your best. They have amazing shower stuff, hairstyling products, toothbrushes and toothpaste, and of course, razors and shave supplies. And I mentioned, I guess it's been a couple of months now, I got this huge box of stuff from Dollar Shave Club. That's the one where my wife said, I don't know if you ordered this stuff, but we got a huge box and it smells like man. So one of the things that I've been using, I'm not a body wash guy, but I decided to try it out because what the heck, I got it for free. It was called mint cedarwood. I don't know what mint cedarwood smells like. I didn't know there was a mint flavor of wood, but nonetheless, there apparently is. And you know how it leaves me feeling and smelling? Clean. That's all I really want. I don't want any weird aromas going on. I just don't want to stink. I want to feel clean, and it does. It works great, and it's a good, healthy-sized bottle. I've been using it for a few weeks now, and there's still plenty left in it. So very good products at Dollar Shave Club that pretty much help you in no matter what area of hygiene you're looking for great products in.
That's how we get ready. And don't ask how I know how Greg gets ready in the morning, but you're not us. You have your own way to get ready. You might shave your whole body to get ready for a bike race. Dollar Shave Club's executive razor and shave butter can help with that. You might do your hair to get ready for your soccer match, because let's face it, dandruff and BO are unfair advantages when it comes to playing soccer. Boogies by Dollar Shave Club can help you get your style right. The thing is, no matter what you do to get ready, Dollar Shave Club has everything you need.
There's another reason never to be in a bike race. Right now, you can get ready with an amazing deal on any one of their starter sets. As we mentioned before, we recommend the Daily Essentials Starter Set because it's got so many different things, like the Amber Lavender Body Cleanser, but you can't go wrong really with any of them. Head over to dollarshaveclub.com/martini to pick your own Dollar Shave Club starter set for just $5. After your starter set, products ship at a regular price. And make sure you check out their new video, too. That's dollarshaveclub.com/martini. dollarshaveclub.com/martini. All right, Jim, let's move to our bad martini now. And at first, this is going to seem like a good martini. And in the immediacy of the story, I guess it is a good martini. Right now, there are reunions going on north of the demilitarized zone in North Korea. Basically, 89 families from South Korea were selected from more than 57,000 who had applied to reunite with loved ones they've been separated from for nearly 70 years, since the outbreak of the Korean War in 1950, 68 years ago. So a lot of hugs, a lot of tears, a lot of photographs, obviously a lot of catching up. But CNN, among others, is covering this story, and see if you can figure out what's missing from this explanation.
And it is a very emotional moment for them. Many of these families didn't even know whether their loved ones were still alive. They were torn apart, these families, back in the Korean War. That's the 1950s. So you can imagine that many of these people, these participants, are very old. The majority are aged 80 or above.
Well, what a shame. There was a war 68 years ago, so these folks haven't seen each other. Jim, there's one reason these folks haven't seen each other. It's not because the South Koreans have stopped this from happening. It's because the North Korean communist regime essentially runs a prison camp that keeps its people there and punishes them severely anytime they go against the wishes of the ruler there, Kim Jong-un, at present. And this is what always happens. We have this love affair with socialism now for some on the left. And this is what socialism ultimately gets to, repression and misery, all in the quest for equality, supposedly. So lesson learned, hopefully, but apparently not by CNN.
Greg, I understand if you're a reporter and you're trying to summarize big chunks of a foreign country's history, sometimes you have to glide over some of the details. But this seems like a fairly relevant portion of this story. This is not, when there's a conflict between a free country and an unfree country, chances are the unfree country has something to do with it because they're unfree. Generally, it is not free democracies that restrict the movement of their people. Probably my favorite example of this, not quite grasping the local history in journalism recently, Greg, came during the World Cup over in Russia. This was back in July. The Washington Post wrote an article about the Russians, locals, and visiting foreign tourists and how they were starting to have romantic flings. And they used the sentence, "The influx of foreigners creates both excitement and fear for a country unused to ethnic diversity." Now, Greg, I don't know how familiar you are with Russian history, but it's not that Russia's not used to ethnic diversity. It's that they put a lot of effort into getting rid of that ethnic diversity.
Yes.
They had a whole bunch of Ukrainians, Tartars, Chechens, and Turkic Bashirs, Armenians, Jews, And the Russian government, particularly during the Stalinist era, put a heck of a lot of effort into forcibly relocating all of those people, pushing them out, treating them badly, oppressing them, sending them off to the gulags. This didn't happen by accident. Longtime listeners may recall that I lived in Turkey for 2 years, back 2005, 2007. And a visiting friend said, wow, you really, you don't see much diversity here in Turkey. I observed, yes, that's not an accident. They put a lot of so-called effort into that. Of course, that was illegal to declare the Armenian genocide occurred. You could only refer to it in print as the so-called Armenian genocide. When countries are, ethnically monolithic, sometimes in their history there are reasons for that, and that's kind of what we've seen here in Turkey and in Russia, and in this case of South Korea. Look, these people aren't separated by accident. It wasn't really, there was a war and things have been bad ever since. Look, if you're going to go to the Korean border, if you're going to report on these countries, paint the full picture. Take the time to explain why this happened. Don't let it be kind of isn't it terrible? These two countries just can't seem to get along.
Exactly right. There's a clear good guy, a clear bad guy in this story, and it's the commies who started the war in the first place. So if you're looking for equal blame here, it's just not there, if you're being honest. All right, let's move on to our crazy martini now, Jim. And one of the things that erupted, I guess it was late last week while you were still blissfully on vacation, President Trump revoking the security clearance for former CIA Director John Brennan, which has led to a whole lot of people protesting, a letter from a bunch of different national security professionals protesting. You got some people saying, hey, pull mine if you're going to pull his and all that sort of thing. President Trump, at least initially, claimed that the pulling of the security clearance for John Brennan was because of national security concerns, while his critics were saying, no, he just doesn't like the fact that John Brennan criticizes him. Well, President Trump not doing himself any favors in this debate. Twitter yesterday. Just watch former intelligence official Philip Mudd become totally unglued and weird while debating wonderful Paris Denard over Brennan's security clearance. Denard destroyed him, but Mudd is in no mental condition to have such a clearance. Should be revoked? At Sean Hannity for some reason. I don't know if he got that idea from Hannity or he's suggesting Hannity keep pushing for that. There's also earlier today, Trump tweeting out, even James Clapper has admonished John Brennan for having gone totally off the rails. Maybe Clapper is being nice to me so he doesn't lose his security clearance for lying to Congress. Well, if he lied to Congress and you think that's worthy of him losing his security clearance, then you should just do it. Whether he's nice to you really shouldn't matter that much. And then he's also suggested, and there's plenty of people who agree with him, verbally last week that Bruce Orr, the guy from the Justice Department whose wife worked at Fusion GPS, ought to lose his as well. So, Jim, I had suggested in the email today that this is like the anti-Oprah. You lose a clearance and you lose a clearance. What do you make of this?
The first thing is that most presidents don't worry that much about what former officials of the previous administration are saying about them. Right? Now, you might say, look, Bush was very quiet about Obama. Republicans honor this more than Democrats do. But by and large, most presidents are busy being president and aren't that worried. Of course, officials from the previous administration are going to criticize you. That's part of the game. That's part of politics. That's part of the way the world operates. You shouldn't expect these people to say, hey, you guy who replaced us, you're doing a great job. There was kind of interesting column by William McGurn in the Wall Street Journal today. My boss, Rich Lowry, kind of made some of the similar points that, first of all, you probably could make a stronger argument for Clapper losing his security clearance over lying to Congress than you can for Brennan. Brennan has not helped himself. Brennan really does come across as a Daily Kos commenter, open member of the resistance, hyperbolic. He keeps using the word treason in reference to President Trump, and most of us would say, look, if you have legal evidence that President Trump has committed treason, show it, pal. All right? Don't just throw this. This is not a term you should be throwing around willy-nilly when you really mean, well, I strongly disagree with this president. Obviously, the implication of that is that John Brennan, former director of the CIA, knows something we don't. He's seen something that we haven't seen. Now, all of this is probably deeply annoying to the administration, deeply frustrating. But in the end, John Brennan's got a right to be as hyperbolic as the president is. When you start revoking this, first of all, if there's any implication that Brennan has indeed leaked classified information, either in public comments or to private officials or some other circumstance like that, refer the whole thing to the DOJ. If he really is doing this, you shouldn't be revoking his security clearance through a presidential action, you should be prosecuting him. This is a crime. I thought you were going to take this stuff very seriously, Mr. President. But if you don't have evidence of that, if you don't have a plausible case that Brennan is doing that, and you simply are doing this because Brennan annoys you, well, that's not a good enough reason. That's never been the reason, a sufficient reason to revoke somebody's security clearance. Now, if you want to have a discussion about how many government officials of the previous administration should keep their clearances, are there too many people walking around with security clearances and the current intelligence information who don't want to have that? We can have that discussion. That's fine. But when the president says explicitly, he's saying nice things, is this because he's afraid I'm going to revoke his? It's like he's openly saying, I have this power and I'm going to use it. Ha, 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 ha. And that's not what the whole purpose of the entire security clearance process is there for. There are certain people who have to work with America's secrets. Ideally, we can trust all of them. If there's some good reason for Brennan or Clapper or any of these people to do so, that they shouldn't be trusted with it, fine. We can open up that process through proper procedures and through proper channels. This shouldn't be done because the president watches cable news and is annoyed by somebody. Phil Mudd's got every constitutional right to go on TV and say anything he wants about the president. And that should not make his security clearance should not be contingent upon him saying nice things about the president on cable news. Trump constantly, steps on his own message and does things like this. It's deeply infuriating. I just would add one last note, though. I remember writing this article earlier this year when James Comey's book was coming out. There were a lot of people in the FBI who were not quite comfortable with the role James Comey increasingly was stepping out into. As he got out on Twitter and he was doing the Colbert Report, most former FBI directors, they go off and they teach at a university. Maybe they write their memoirs. It's not the first time we had an FBI director argue with the president. I think Louis Freeh and Bill Clinton had enormous fights during their times in office. But all in all, generally, you didn't see members of law enforcement like the FBI or members of the intelligence community jumping out and becoming full-fledged political activists. Maybe you could make an argument for James Woolsey, but he was kind of focusing on intelligence and national security and kind of, he was staying in his lane. He just happened to be a right-of-center guy in his worldview and policy preferences and philosophies and things like that. The more openly, outspokenly political and partisan that CIA directors and FBI directors and officials like this get, the more likely you are to see presidents start retaliating in ways like this. So again, I do not support what the president is doing. I think this is we're right up the edge of a critical abuse of power. But having said that, we got here because of the actions of folks like Comey and Brennan stepping into a partisan role that CIA directors and FBI directors never did before. One last thing to kind of throw out here, the idea that politics always stops at the water's edge has been, perhaps a little exaggerated. We've always had partisan differences. If you believe that different policies will give you different outcomes, then I don't think there's anything wrong with arguing about what the best approach is to deal with terrorism or Russia or North Korea. There's a reason. I don't think that any argument about national security policy is inherently damaging to our security. I think we can and should have these sorts of debates. And we shouldn't be afraid of these officials necessarily expressing their mind and saying their piece and all that kind of stuff. But the moment you kind of start posing as, leader of the resistance or something like that, there was this decorum to national security debates. It did take a certain tone that kind of tried to avoid the ugliest and the nastiest and the most smashed mouth tones. Look, you very rarely saw a former FBI director on a late night talk show couch. It was kind of an odd spot to see Jim Comey. You didn't usually see CIA directors sitting down with the likes of Rachel Maddow. And it's worth noting, as Bill McGurn says in his column, Rachel Maddow actually was pressing Brennan on this, saying, well, you accused the president of treason. And he's like, well, I didn't mean they committed treason. She points out that when you say the president's behavior is nothing short of treasonous, you're accusing him of treason. You can't really back away from that. If Brennan says, you know what, that was hyperbolic, I shouldn't have put it that way, fine, come out and say that. But on Meet the Press this weekend, he was not changing his tune.
He is kind of a dumpster fire in a number of different ways. Anyway, happy Tuesday, everybody. Jim Garrity of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. And don't forget to head over to Dollar Shave Club to get your starter set for just $5. DollarShaveClub.com/martini. And tune in again Wednesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.